Mr. Chairman and committee members, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm Chris Argentieri. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Times. So at a time when our nation and state are so divided, and when democracies around the globe are facing dire consequences that are imperiling their ability to function, the press is absolutely in crisis. You've heard some of the statistics earlier. According to a Northwestern study, we're losing 2.5 newspapers per week in the United States. More importantly, we've lost 2/3 of working journalists over the past couple decades. Following the pandemic, both of those statistics we can expect to accelerate. These trends have been visited absolutely on California. Professor Singer talked about some of that earlier. And given the economics of news organizations such as my own, the Los Angeles Times, California faces the very real risk of the entire state effectively becoming a news desert, a reality that already exists for 1/5 of the nation's citizens. So many would argue that this is just the ebb and flow of capitalism and that we should let these legacy businesses die off, or management in these companies has been so poor, we've done this to ourselves. Too many of these newspapers are owned by vulture capitalists that have bled them dry, and all of these theories not only misrepresent but certainly oversimplify the facts. I'm sure there's some truth to each of these premises, but they're outdated tropes that don't begin to address the problem. The first thing I think we can all agree on, or we wouldn't be here today, is the important service this industry provides. For much of the country's history, the world has looked at the U.S. as a bastion of a functioning democracy, as evidenced largely through an independent, free, and diverse press. But we've fallen behind other nations who are addressing a key contributor to the demise of the woes of the news industry, and that is the market imbalance that exists between the news companies themselves and the large digital platforms. We're here today looking for the great state of California to once again, as it has many times in its history, take a leadership position in the United States. We're asking that the digital platforms be required to compensate news companies for the content they produce. We've fallen behind other democracies of the world in supporting journalism. You've heard some already, but Australia, Canada, the European Union have taken various steps to bolster news gathering operations and address the harm caused by Google and Meta cornering the digital advertising markets. The News Media Bargaining Code in Australia led to a significant number of journalists being retained at publications both big and small, and all sorts of agreements between publishers and the platforms that would not have existed without the introduction of legislation. The Los Angeles Times employs more journalists than any news organization west of Washington, D.C. We have one of the most diverse newsrooms of any organization in the country. We have a leadership team in our newsroom that is majority female and majority people of color. We have one of the most long-standing fellowship programs, giving opportunities to young and less experienced journalists of color. We have one of the Berkeley local fellows working with us as well. We have as large of an audience as we've ever had at any time in the heyday of the print business. This year we were awarded 2 more Pulitzer Prizes, one for breaking news related to the Los Angeles City Council and another for photography, which brought to light the plight of an unhoused mother. This marked the 5th year in a row we've been awarded a Pulitzer Prize and secured our place as the winner of more breaking news Pulitzers than any news organization in the country. We produce a daily local television show and special programs that have not been nominated and won multiple Emmys. We produce some of the largest and most critically acclaimed narrative podcasts since the beginning of the history of the medium. The list goes on, and I don't say all this to tout the wonders of the LA Times. I do believe in the wonders of the LA Times. That's not the point. It's instead to make the point that we can achieve all this success cross-platform, do all the things that we're supposed to be doing as an organization. We're still unable to achieve anywhere near a sustainable business. We continue to lose money. We're burning cash at an unsustainable rate. And as we sit here today, Los Angeles, California, and the American West are at the risk of losing a great news organization because we have no way of knowing how long we can survive. What we can definitively say is that it won't be long without significant changes. And there are things that can be done to address the crisis, cannot be done without legislation being a part of it. critical contributor to our economic woes, grossly inequitable market position news organizations have compared to the large digital platforms. Just to understand the difference in market dynamics, just consider that Google earns enough advertising revenue to pay for the cost of our newsroom in less than 3 hours, the annual cost of our newsroom. Google's revenue for a month or two would cover the cost of all working journalists in California. And I raise this not because I begrudge their success. Quite the contrary, it's success like this of California companies that I think we should celebrate. I mention these statistics because they're relevant. Large digital platforms like Google and Meta use our content to generate billions of dollars in revenue and do not compensate us for it. The size of the companies makes it impossible for us or anyone in our industry, for that matter, to have a seat at the table to resolve this issue through normal business channels. Google's vertical integration of the digital ad marketplace, which is subject to action by nearly all 50 states, and including the United States Department of Justice, and their amassing of the world's consumer data, combined with its scale, make it laughable to think they have any incentive to negotiate. When publishers started making their content available for search years ago, there was a value exchange. Mr. Gingras referred to it. It's a bit outdated, however. Publishers made content available on Google search engines. People would enter a search, Google would return results, and in cases where the results included a news article, people would click and be sent to the publisher's site. The publisher would then have the opportunity to monetize through advertising or sell subscriptions. Over time, Google has leveraged news content to advance the accumulation of consumer data, and as technology has advanced, they have created a walled garden. They have organized the world's data, which is not an overstatement, in such a way that when somebody enters a search term, there's often no reason to leave Google, as Brandon illustrated earlier. Many times the answer to the query comes at the top of the page in a full paragraph of text, images, a chart, a list, eliminating the need to go to a publisher's site. The majority of search queries don't leave Google, which has eliminated the value exchange. An example of this would be if you were to enter into Google words along the lines of, what was the Anaheim corruption scandal about? When someone, which somebody may do to learn more about the issue that transpired last year that the chairman referred to earlier, involving the former mayor of Anaheim, the user would see results that would start with a summarized paragraph from a story from one of the news organizations that reported on it, most likely the Voice of OC. You would see a paragraph explaining what the issue was about. And again, let's remember, you asked, what was the Anaheim corruption scandal about? Summarized paragraph telling you exactly what it was about. You scroll down the page, the user would see question boxes that would include things like, what is the issue in Anaheim? And if the user hits one of those drop-downs, again, another summary of a news story, this time from the Los Angeles Times, would come up explaining the key points of the issue. Scrolling down further, you would see videos, mostly from Google-owned YouTube, yet originating, the content itself originating with news organizations with more on the scandal. And only when you scroll all the way down the page would the user find original reporting from the LA Times, the Voice of OC, or the Orange County Register, and other news organizations in Southern California. So even when people leave Google's walled garden, or they come to us directly, Google gets a piece of virtually all that revenue. Google controls the entire digital advertising technology stack. They earn from virtually every dollar of digital advertising we sell. Some 70% of digital ad revenues go to two dominant platforms like Google and Meta.
Mr. Argentieri, notwithstanding the fact you picked my favorite example, I'm going to have to ask you to summarize here.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, in a state where some of the most valuable and innovative intellectual property is created, I just ask very simply, does anybody think it's okay for a corporation to use somebody's product that takes time, resources, and money to create, particularly one as important to society as this one, to generate billions of dollars and not pay for it? I'll leave you with that.
All right.